Had it before. I appreciate it. I think there are similarities. When I ran for governor of Maine in 1994 as an independent, we had been through a period in our state of intense partisanship to the point where we had a governor of one party and a speaker of the House of the other party. They couldn't agree on anything. The government actually closed down because they couldn't agree on a budget. And I was in part a product of that experience. The reason I'm here today is that I think we're in a similar place where everybody agrees we've got all these problems and we could work for a day with this group and perhaps lengthen the list or hone the list, but the point is not what are the problems, the point is how do we solve them. And I am just finishing a book about Winston Churchill and the beginning of World War II in Britain, and I subscribe heartily to Mark Twain's observation that history doesn't always repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And this is a case where I think it rhymes. When Churchill went in as prime minister, he immediately installed a nonpartisan government. He brought in independents, laborites, and Tories into his government. It was a government of national unity. Why? Because Britain was facing an enormous challenge, a challenge to its very survival. I think we're facing a similar kind of challenge today, only it's a slow motion catastrophe. We don't have troops pouring across our neighbors' borders, but we are facing a kind of slow motion challenge that if we don't address, our children and grandchildren are going to look at us and say, what in the hell were you doing when this country went down? Tom Brokaw wrote a book called The Greatest Generation. And I'm afraid if he wrote that book today about us, we would be the lousiest generation because of what we are doing to our children and our grandchildren in terms of everything from not fixing the infrastructure, building up debts, building up a Medicare debt that's unsustainable, not developing an energy or climate change policy. I mean, the list just goes on. And the politics of this country, which have been essentially avoidance for a number of years, have now, I think, reached crisis proportion, and therefore it's time for a kind of unity approach. And that's exactly what I tried to do in Maine. And what we found was that, A, the people liked it. The politicians didn't like it too much, at least not at first, but the public liked it. And if you reach out and try to work with people in a nonpartisan way, they are responsive. And I think most people would say that it was pretty successful for 8 years, just trying to work on the problems and not worrying about who gets the credit or who is going to win the next election or what kind of the game is that we're playing. We seem to be in a situation where it's all about the game and not about the end result. So what if you win the next election? What are you going to do? Well, we're going to then set ourselves up to win the next election. And that doesn't solve any problems. We've got to have 10 and 20-year vision in this country, not 1 to 2 year vision. So I feel that the experience in Maine is reasonably relevant. But if we don't pay attention to this and get at this problem of reaching out to people across the aisle, and frankly, we're talking about, I made a point in our discussions, instead of bipartisan, we should be saying nonpartisan, because 40% of the American people aren't in either of the parties. So it should be nonpartisan. So I think that, basically we're at a place where what we've been doing in recent years isn't working, and if we continue, we feel, this group feels, that we're at a tipping point, and that we could go into a period of a permanent decline, and it doesn't have to be that way. This country has enormous resources of talent and energy, and it needs to be tapped and unleashed, not suppressed and pushed aside.
Thank you very much, Governor King. Susan Eisenhower also wishes to comment.
Yes, I'd like to follow up on those comments. I think they were terrific, and it is very true that we've got a crisis unfolding in slow motion. But here's the thing. We've got a number of issues that are all big-ticket items. They're all going to be very, very costly to address. That is preparing for our energy future, all of the new investments that have to be made there. We've got a climate change imperative to go with that. Health care, baby boomers retiring, infrastructure, all of these are big-ticket items. And we are in a diminished financial situation. So the reason we need bipartisanship is it's going to require political courage to make choices. And what I'd like to see these candidates do is get up and tell us what their priorities are. They can give us 100 wonderful little plans, but what is the overarching strategy for the future?
Thank you very much. Senator Cohen also wished to comment.
You know, we're up here talking about what the candidates have an obligation to do, but I'd like to shift it just for a moment to say, what do you and I have an obligation to do? Because we're part of the problem. Part of the problem is that everybody talks about rights. Few people talk about duties. Everyone talks about benefits. Few people talk about burdens. And that is what is the essence of the paralysis that we see today. When Governor King was talking about Winston Churchill on the verge of World War II, I was thinking of Walter Lippmann, a great essayist, and he was giving an address to his Harvard colleagues, class of 1910, 30th reunion. And he said, here we are today. Every time we had a tough decision to make, we took the easy way out. There's a mechanized evil at loose throughout Europe, and here we are on the edge of a world war. He said, this is the standard to which the wise shall now repair. You took the good things for granted, and now you must earn them again. And so for every right that you claim you've got a duty, you must fulfill. For every hope you entertain, you've got an obligation you must perform. And for every good that you wish to achieve, you'll have to sacrifice your comfort and your ease, because there's nothing for nothing any longer. Now, those words spoken in 1940. Those words are as relevant today. There is nothing for nothing any longer. We've got to pay our bills. We can't continue to borrow from our children. We are bankrupting them. We're engaged in fiscal child abuse. And it used to be that our parents... It used to be that our parents borrowed so that we would have a better future. And what we are doing today is we are borrowing from our kids so we can enjoy creature comforts today. That is not a moral standard that any of us can be proud of. So let's get back to talking about sacrifice, what each of us has an obligation to do, what we're willing to give up, what we have to pay for. And so it's not just the presidential candidates. The voice has got to come from you to say we're prepared for this. Good.
I've been asked for brief follow-ups from Dr. Absher and Senator Hart.
Let me just say, in the historic examples, I think the next president's got a choice: a failed presidency or a great presidency. And I got a book that's coming out in a couple of weeks. It's 1795. It's affordable to all of your students, and it said, A Call to Greatness, Challenging Our Next President. And it looks through great presidents and failed presidents. It's possible to fail. And it takes as the two greatest that knew how to organize the country in times of crisis, Lincoln and Roosevelt. And they were grand strategists. And as we look at the interacting issues that we're dealing with, you've got to have a transformational president of this nature. Now, Lincoln was a genius. Maybe there are no geniuses running for the presidency. Roosevelt was not a genius, but he knew how to get the best minds, Republican and Democratic, and put them to work to win World War II. And that's what we've got to follow. And I just end with one other historic example. Benjamin Franklin, he was 81. I used to think that was real old. After 4 months of the Constitutional Convention, when we had greater wedge issues, and we've got today, greater divisions, he got up on the floor and he said, let's each one doubt a little bit of his own infallibility and sign on to this document. They didn't think it was that good. In retrospect, it's the miracle of Philadelphia. We can create, with the next president, if they're willing to rise to the occasion, another miracle in our finest hour. But it's that or loss.
Thank you very much, Dr. Absher.